seems like a hell of a long time, you know, since I was at Wigan, and but you know, had a great time. I got to be honest, I wasn't sure what to expect when I came over, and I probably wasn't that keen to start with to come over and play at club level, but there was probably 5 or 6 of my teammates who were all coming over, and they, I guess in the end, were very persuasive, you know, and I was looking to be able to play in one of the clubs that they'd already joined, but because of the rules I couldn't do that, and I got to start at Wigan, and it's worked out to be one of the best decisions I've ever made.
He's only about 10 yards short from the stage line. Out to Holden. Into Kenny. Can he make it? Kenny. Yes! Great fly by Kenny, just to the left of the same stick.
To be thought of in such a way by the rugby league people of Wigan, and as you say, it was only 25 games, but that was probably the equivalent to our season back home. You know, we used to play 25 or 26 games, so it. But yeah, you know, 25 games, but it was 25 games that I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed playing alongside those guys. And one of the pleasing things for me was I came back to England in 1986 on a Kangaroo tour, and there was probably 3 or 4, maybe more, of the guys that I played with at Wigan were now playing for their country, and that was a very pleasing thing, that these guys were able to go on from there and achieve their goal and represent their country. Well, having been here in '82 on the Kangaroo tour, and obviously, you know, having a lot of success there and going through undefeated, when I came back in '84, I really wasn't sure what to expect. I thought the game would obviously have improved, because there was a lot of talk in '82 about how England needed to copy what Australia did, and the way we played and the way we trained, and I sort of thought, well, maybe they would do that, but I wasn't 100% sure that they would have been able to achieve that much in 2 years. But look, it was, I guess, a bit of a surprise that they were playing a lot better. In a way, it was probably very similar to the competition I was playing in back home in Australia, where over here there was probably 4, maybe 5 teams that were your top sides, and you knew when you were going to play them. I think there were Leeds, St Helens, obviously Wigan, who I was playing with, but I think Castleford may have been one of the top sides then, and I think even Warrington, but you knew when you were playing those teams it was going to be tough. But then after that, when you didn't play any of those teams, it was a pretty easy game, and it was a similar situation to back in Sydney, although I guess probably the easy games weren't quite as easy back home as what they were over here, but certainly the game had improved. But you know, whether or not it remained to be seen, whether or not they had improved enough to beat us in 1986 on the next Kangaroo tour. When I came over on the tour in '82, I was expecting to be one of the guys that would play against all the local clubs and be sitting in the grandstand watching the test matches. And fortunately for me, I was able to play my first test for Australia. It was played over here in England. But I guess, yes, with the talk from the English people, all the talk was, you know, we've got to start to look at what Australia have done and how good they've been, and you had the feeling that, yeah, you know, I was part of this new revolution that they were hoping to achieve, and yeah, I guess it was very special.
It's number 1 Greg Bretnell, number 2 Eric Graf, number 3 Mal Meninga, number 4 Steve Rogers, number 5 Kerry Burstead, number 6 Brett Kenny.
For me, my main thing was just making sure that I was playing well enough to continue in the test teams, and I was fortunate enough to do that. I played all 3 tests here in England, and then we played, I think, 2 tests in France, and I was able to play in them as well. But yes, we, through listening to people, the fans, and even you know, some of the administrators of the British Rugby League, you sort of had an idea that yes, we were part of a new revolution. We were showing them something that they needed to do to improve their game. I've come back here to play for Wigan as a test player. Before the '82 Test series, if it had have happened the way I thought it was going to be, and I didn't play in any Test matches, well, I just would have been one of the Australian players that would come here on the '82 tour. But having played Test matches, yeah, I guess the expectation was probably, you know, that you're a Test player, so you're a quality player, and I really didn't look at it that way. I come over here to play, and that was it. I really didn't feel too much pressure to have to perform because of what I've achieved previously. But obviously, look, that comes with the job. You know, if you play at Test level, obviously people expect that you're going to be a quality player, and they expect you to perform at that level all the time, or to play as though you were playing at Test level, and even though it was just for a club. And so, you know, that was the way it was. But as I said, I really felt no pressure myself. When I arrived at Wigan, it probably took a few weeks, obviously a few games to get used to the guys that I was playing with.
As it goes to Ford on to West back on to Ford at the gap, on to Kenny going for the line, beats him beautifully. Oh, immersive running by Kenny, good try to the stand of half, down jinked, lovely balance, nice footwork.
But you could sense with the guys that were in the team, and as I mentioned before, there was a number of younger players who went on and represented their country. I mean, you could see that, yeah, this wasn't a bad side, and, you know, we were winning some games, and it just, yeah, it just felt like, you know, we could go a fair way in this competition. Playing at Parramatta, I started there in 1980, and the club had actually played in two previous grand finals in the late 70s, and unfortunately got beaten in both of them. And then come 1981, I was part of their first grade team, and yeah, we managed to make the grand final in 1981 for the third time for the club, but went through and we won that game, and it was the first premiership Parramatta had ever had. So it was a very special time, and a very special time for a lot of the Parramatta fans, and they'd been through a lot of heartache in the previous two grand finals. So a very special time, and some great memories. And of course, we were able to, you know, succeed in 1981 and win it again in 82 and 83. And probably what a lot of people don't realise is that we played again in the grand final in 1984. So we played in 4 grand finals in a row, and unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, I guess, but we were only fortunate enough to win 3 out of those 4. I think coming through at the same time with a lot of other guys around the same age, the likes of Peter Sterling, Steve Ella, Eric Groth, John Muggleton, you know, Paul Taylor, these guys were all around the same age, 21 years of age, and it certainly did help. But I remember 1980, I started playing first grade, and it was a little bit intimidating walking into a change room and seeing guys like Bob O'Reilly, Ron Hilditch, Mick Crane and Ray Price, and Steve Edge, who was the skipper of the team. These guys I was watching on TV 12 months earlier, and suddenly now I'm in the same change rooms and playing alongside them. It was a little bit intimidating, but then once, you know, the other guys were coming through into first grade, by 1981 we were all playing first grade, and it wasn't as intimidating, and it's something that I really enjoyed. We had a great time. Not just on the football field but off the field, and I think that played a big part in our success. Jack Gibson, as a coach, I guess I would describe him as a cryptic coach, and what I mean by that is that if you ask Jack a question, he wouldn't necessarily give you a straight answer. I'll give you a perfect example of that. Peter Sterling, at training after the weekend's game, said to Jack that he was a little bit disappointed with his kicking game. He said, Jack, I'm getting the kicks away without a problem. He said, but I can't seem to have them land on the grass. They're being caught on the full by fullbacks or wingers. Do you have any sort of solution for me? And Jack said, well, the best suggestion I could tell you is to kick for the seagulls. Now, playing at Parramatta, it's a long way away from the ocean, and we're thinking seagulls. There's no seagulls out here. And it was only a couple of weeks later that we played at the Sydney Cricket Ground in one of the semi-finals, and of course there's always seagulls down there at the Sydney Cricket Ground. And we were in the dressing room having a look out, watching the bit of the reserve grade game, and we saw these seagulls in the corner of the field, and of course the ball gets kicked there, and there's no one there, and that's when it sunk in. So he gave you an answer, but you had to think about the answer, and these were the sorts of things that Jack did, and I think that's what made us better players, because we weren't just given an answer and said, oh, okay, that's it, and just walk away. We had to think about it, which made us think more about the game. Jack was the type of guy that took a lot of interest in his players. He always liked to know how things were at home, how things were at work. He always wanted to make sure that you were happy with things at home and at work. If ever you weren't performing that well, one of the first questions he would ask you is, how are things at home? And he'd always be there to try and help sort things out. He believed that if you were happy away from the football field, he was going to get a better performance out of you on the football field. And he was one of the few coaches that I've ever played under that if you weren't performing well and you were going to be dropped from first grade, he would let you know before they even announced the team. So it was never going to be a shock to you. You knew before anyone else. And I've played under and worked with coaches since that don't do that. And I was actually quite surprised. I thought, Jack was one of the few guys that did that, and I thought that was very important, and everyone had a lot of respect for Jack Gibson. I think it was because he was so open with them and so honest. And he was, look, I think he was probably 20 or 30 years ahead of his time. You look at rugby league back home in Australia now, and it's all professional, and everyone's big on weight training. And they say now, you've got to do weight training. They probably do weights about 3 or 4 times a week. Back in 1981, Jack Gibson had us doing weight training, not every night, but we did weight training in the off season, and we won 3 premierships under him, and so it just shows you how far advanced he was in the game. You could see with Jack having gone to the States, the things he'd picked up there, different things. The weight training was one of those things that Jack had picked up on. Even it got to the extent where at training, we would train 3 times a week. Tuesday night was obviously our first training session after the weekend's games, and we would have a video of an NFL game, or it showed you part of the game and what goes on behind the scenes. And so they were quite interesting, and actually picked up a lot of things on that. And I remember one that interested me quite a lot, and I picked up some training tips on it. Was one of the guys, I think it was a running back, and he showed you how he used to run up and down a hill, and that strengthened his legs. And I thought, oh, that's, I'll do that. And I started doing that in the off season. And so there was a lot of things that you picked up on. And Jack was like that. He was one of the first coaches in Australia to ever go to America and learn what they did. And because the reality was they were professional footballers, we weren't, and it certainly did help us. And as I said before, we were able to win 3 competitions. So he in a cricketing terms, he had the runs on the board. I was very fortunate, and success did come pretty quickly for me. I was graded at Parramatta as a 19-year-old. 12 months earlier, I was playing for my local club, Guildford. But I guess I was very fortunate at the same time to have a family that I've got. My dad played baseball back home in Australia, and he played for Australia, represented his country. So he was very much aware of what can happen to young kids, and so I was always sort of kept grounded. And I think too, the fact that when I started playing at Parramatta, the senior players, the likes of Ray Price, Mick Cronin, Steve Edge, Bob O'Reilly, these sort of guys kept me grounded as well, and so it was good to be able to do that. And I guess with everything that happened, and as is, getting there in 1980, and by the end of 1981, I've won a first grade premiership at the age of 20 years of age. And you could sort of get too far ahead of yourself, but these guys had all the experience. They'd been there before. They knew what it was like, and they could, if they saw that you were getting a little bit out of control, they'd certainly pull you into line. And especially with the size of some of them, there was no way I was going to argue with them. Well, in 1982, came away on the Kangaroo Tour, and I had been away from home, but only on an end-of-season trip from Parramatta, which lasted, I think, about 2 weeks. So all of a sudden now I found myself coming to England, and I was going to be away from home for 3 months, and I found it a little bit daunting at first, but thankfully there was, I think, 6 or 7 of us from Parramatta all coming away on the tour.
From our club in Sydney, Parramatta, we've had a few representatives over here, and they've given me a few clues, mainly about the grounds and the conditions that we were playing against, but I suppose that's something I'll find out for myself when I do get on the paddock, so I think it'll be a bit of trial and error.
I was very quiet, shy sort of kid, and hadn't known too many of the other guys that were on the tour, so I was happy that at least there was someone that I knew and I would be able to sit with most of the time and have a talk. But I've got to say, being on that tour, the older guys, and most of them had been on a previous tour, this was their second one, they really made me feel at home, and all the other younger guys that were away on their first tour. We were involved in everything. It wasn't like these guys sort of separated themselves from us and they went this way and we went that way. We were all together and we did everything together. So, that was one of the best parts of the tour. Coming to Wigan wasn't as daunting, and I think that the reason being is as I was this experienced now at being away. I was a lot older, and by that stage I'd played Test football, and I was a lot more comfortable within myself as far as being a player was concerned.
Could well have been more points on the board for Wigan. Now it's Eccles coming forward, beautiful break by Eccles, proving elusive and strong as Ferguson goes in, helped by Kenny. Scott to Holding, long one to Kenny. Kenny a long pass out onto Ferguson, Ferguson coming inside. Holding to Kenny. Kenny a little grubber kick there. And the diving point is kicked dead by Ford. And it comes out to Holding. Holding out to Kenny. Kenny a short one. Kenny's run round. Kenny dummy trying to make the red. Back inside onto Whitfield.
I guess wasn't sure what to expect when I came over. Having been to England wasn't the problem, because I'd been before, obviously, in the 82 Kangaroo Tour, but all of a sudden now I've got to get used to living in a house rather than staying in a motel. But it was great. I mean, the people of Wigan were fantastic, and the thing that surprised me most was the fact that even when I was at home, at Parramatta you could walk around the street, and yes, you would have people come up and say hello and everything, but at Wigan it seemed like everybody knew every Wigan player, and it didn't matter where I went, everyone come up and said hello, and were always pleased to see the way I was playing, and it made me feel comfortable. It made me feel part of Wigan, and as I said, the people of the club were very good to me. The players were great. They were a great bunch of blokes, and we had a lot of fun and a lot of laughs. I was fortunate that there were 6 other guys from Parramatta who were playing at various clubs in the competition. So again, as I mentioned before, it was always going to be a little bit tough for me. I was never one of those guys that could just come out and introduce myself to people and feel comfortable with it. So having those guys over, it was always good that I knew I could always go and have a chat to them. And we used to catch up with each other every now and then. And of course at Christmas time, we all got together at one of the guys' houses and spent Christmas together, and couldn't spend New Year's Eve together because we had to play on New Year's Day, but which was something I found very hard to accept. But that was the way the competition was. But yeah, having those guys here certainly helped me. We weren't sort of encouraged too much by Jack Gibson or anyone at the club really. They sort of didn't object to us coming over, but it wasn't something that they pushed. And I guess after Parramatta lost 7 players to England or to the English competition, a lot of the clubs then started to think, well, we can't afford to let this happen. And obviously Parramatta, because it was 7 of their top side players, and majority of them, I think there was only 1 player that came across that wasn't an international. So you can imagine having your team lose 6 6 internationals out of the side, and they still performed very well. I think we just missed the semi-finals in 1985, but we did make the finals in 1985. We didn't make the grand final, but it was something that the clubs sort of realised, and as I say, in particular Parramatta, they realised that we sort of can't let this thing happen again, and of course that's what did happen. We never came back after that, and just continued our careers at Parramatta. It was okay. I mean, they didn't make too much of a fuss, but guys had come over and just introduced themselves to me, and there was an Australian guy playing there by the name of Mark Cannon, who was actually playing 5'8" or standoff at the time, and I think it was only a few weeks later he went to another club. I'm not sure which club, but I guess in a way that helped, having another Australian there. John Ferguson had played there, but by then he had gone home. He came back and played obviously in the final at Wembley, but yeah, the guys, I felt very welcomed. I was a little bit uncomfortable, but then that's me at the start. It was a little bit uncomfortable, but yeah, give another week or two and I was fine.
Hunsett lined up, the referee only taking them the 5 yards back as Holding tries to make a break out beautifully to Potter. As Kenny with him, Joey's on his own. Up to Kenny, Kenny's over under the post. Lovely play by the Wigan half-back to loose forward. Kiss out to Holden, lob pass, slow pass. Kenny, having told it, see the gap. Ready to go for the line, he's got support inside. Going on his own, a good try. A good individual try by Kenny. On to Holden. Holden turning it inside to Ferguson. Ferguson coming down the middle. As Edwards with him, he's gone on his own, he's still going. And he has support, gets it to Holden, to Kenny. Has he got the legs? And the referee's given the try as he slides over. Wolford moves it across. Short one. Good run here by Hunsett, still coming strong. Then it's been intercepted by Kenny. Can he make the line? Oh, great try from the halfway line underneath the post. Smacked that one out of the air.
I always remember Graham West, who was the captain of Wigan at the time, came to my house, and then I followed him in the car to training and back home, and he did that a couple of times, and then after a while I got used to where I was going and what I was doing. So yeah, it was a little bit, I guess in a way could have been a little bit intimidating because I just wasn't sure what to expect, but the guys, yeah, they made me feel very welcome, and as I mentioned before, just had a great time. They were very funny and just enjoyed their company. Playing at Central Park was something very special, and I guess, in a way I was very disappointed and upset to hear that it's no longer there, and I think it's a 3 or 4 story car park now, and I had some very special times there. I did play some test matches at Central Park, but obviously being the home ground of Wigan and playing there, it was a tremendous feeling, and I always remember, after the Challenge Cup final, we were back there at Central Park and went upstairs and went into the boardroom, and they opened up the doors and went out onto a balcony and just went out there, and the supporters were all there, and it was an amazing scene. I had never experienced anything like it before. Probably the closest thing to experiencing that was at a grand final, after the 81 grand final at Parramatta. But you looked out onto Central Park and you could not see a blade of grass. There was that many people. Yeah, some very special memories, and it was a wonderful ground. And as I said, I was a little bit disappointed and upset that it no longer exists. Alan McInnes and Colin Clark, who were the coaches at Wigan at the time, they sort of, I guess, let me do my own thing. They said they wanted me to do a lot of attacking play and obviously, make sure I was defending. They were quite comfortable with the way I was defending, and yeah, so that was it. My role was just to sort of do what I wanted with the football and make sure that we could score some tries.
And very often, if you're a player, it's incidents like that that really set you going. West, good ball from Graham West. Potter, he's got Kenny with him. Oh, he's over! Yes! Magnificent sleight of hand.
So that was good. I enjoyed that sort of role, and we had some good players. Michael Ford, who was playing at halfback at times, and a few, trying to think of the centres now. Colin Whitfield was one of the centres. Steve Donlan was the other centre, and obviously Henderson Gill on the wing. Sean Edwards at fullback. There was probably, and David Stevenson also came in and played in the centre. So, there was a lot of attacking ability there, and that was good for me because I enjoyed having guys that wanted to run with the football, and I always looked to try and put them into holes and things like that, and so it worked out really well, and I enjoyed the game. It was more of a free-flowing game. It wasn't so much defence orientated, so that was one of the pleasures for me. When I arrived here, my first game was against Warrington at Wilderspoon, and I was told, I was actually warned by the players and the coaching staff, what to expect, and it didn't disappoint me, that's for sure. You look out in the crowd, I think there was more action at some stage out in the crowd than there was on the football field, but it was just one of those games. It was a great game to play in, and I always remember at one stage there I'd thrown a pass, and probably 30 to 45 seconds later I caught an elbow to the back of the head, and I thought, welcome to English Rugby League. But enjoyed it. It was great. It was good to get that first game under my belt, and after that, I just enjoyed playing and enjoyed the company of the Wigan players. Coming over here and playing in English football and playing for Wigan, you find out different things, and there's always, as I mentioned, with Warrington was one of the local derbies, but St Helens was the other one, and they said to me, you'll be playing Boxing Day and you'll be playing against St Helens. Well, it didn't worry me who we were playing, it was the fact that we were playing Boxing Day, We don't play it back home on Boxing Day, but obviously, the season goes through over Christmas and that, but they informed me how big the game was, and when you get to the ground, you sort of don't appreciate it until you're actually out there and realise just how big the crowd was.
It's only about 10 yards short from the Saints line. Out to Holden. Into Kenny. Can he make it? Kenny. Yes! Great fly-by Kenny, just to the left of the Saints stick. And the Saints 25, ball moving out to the right. Neil Gordon has the ball. Graham West, and he's through the middle. 2 minutes aboard. Here we go. And Brian good ball. Against the head. We're going to have the ball to Holden. Out to the left, and again. And Kenny has the ball. He's got support within Stevenson. He's missed Stevenson out. Whitby left it. Henderson Gill on the left. Gill scored. A great try. On the Saints 10-yard mark. Out to Kiss. Kiss to West. West to Kenny. A wide pass out. And the ball's got to Ferguson, who beats one man, but can't beat the next two who are waiting for him. He's beaten them though. He has beaten them. And the ball at the left to Nicky Kiss. But he can't get a pass in. Yes, he has. To Graham West. And he's good. Yes, he has. Left up the ball. A fantastic try. This is the turnover tackle. Next one is Saints ball. A drop. No, it's up and under. It must be dead ball, I would think. Gill's underneath it. It's been dropped. It's Wigan ball. The referee given a try.
It was a full house, and the thing I liked about the English crowds is they did get very involved in the game, and they used to sing a lot. Back home, they don't sing at all, and there will be stages in the game where it will be pretty quiet, but over here it's always noisy. When you look at that game, it might be close to State of Origin, but I don't know whether I would say it would be as tough as a State of Origin game. But the intensity was obviously was very high, and I know back home we'd have local derbies, but they weren't like they were Wigan versus St Helens or Wigan versus Warrington. They were very tough, and I think it's just it comes down. It's a tradition, and I think that was the thing. The fans love it. They all turn out to watch those games, and there's just that great rivalry. Well, when I came over here, I didn't realise how many games you play, and then they told me, you've got a Lancashire Cup, a Yorkshire Cup, Challenge Cup, premiership rounds, and you know, I think you mentioned earlier I'd played 25 games for Wigan. Well, that was a season for me back in Sydney, and I hadn't played a full season at Wigan. I'd come in well after the season had started, you know, but then, as you say, yeah, it was hard to get used to the fact that you'd play on a weekend and they'd say, well, we've got a game on Tuesday or Wednesday night and it's for the Lancashire Cup, and you go, oh, right, okay, and then, you know, a few weeks later or a month later, it comes down, we've got a game on the weekend, and oh, we've got a game midweek, it's for the Challenge Cup. And I thought, oh, okay, and off we go. So it was a little bit tough at first, but then after a while you got used to it, and you knew, oh well, there could be a game on during the week, and I mean you did have plenty of notice, but initially it was pretty hard for the body to get used to the fact that, you know, you're backing up 2 or 3 days later. Well, when I left Australia to come over here and play for Wigan, I wasn't a professional footballer back home, but Wigan, you know, obviously had become a professional club, and it was great for me. You know, it was a great experience, and I enjoyed, you know, not having to go to work, get up and go to work in the morning, and come home and go to training in the afternoon. I do guess the only problem I had was during the day. I mean, I'm a sort of guy that needs to be doing something all the time. I get bored very easily, and I think I saw just about every video from the video shop, the local video store. But yeah, I found it very difficult to do things during the day. Look for something to do, but did a little bit of sightseeing. But yeah, just enjoyed the fact that I was a professional footballer, because back home, it was something that you always wanted to be, was a professional footballer, and I finally got this opportunity to experience what it would be like.
Well, wrapped up by Johnson, Miller. Now Case taking himself matching half-back, pushes off Miller. Case tattle about 3 yards from the Rovers line, the 6 tattles coming up. Sean Wayne, no, Wayne goes in straight under the post for Wigan.
I'm not surprised that Sean Wayne has had success as a coach. You know, as a player, he was a very intense sort of player, but then he would also have a good time, and you could sense that he was a people's person. He can relate to people and talk to people, and I think that's a very big important part of being a coach. It's not just knowing about the game, but it's knowing how to treat people and how to get the best out of people, and you just sense that was what he was like. Very aggressive sort of back rower, and from what I've been told, I've seen a couple of Wigan games back home. He has his side playing the same way, so it would not surprise me, and I've been telling everyone here since I've been here that, you know, they're all talking about who's going to be playing in the Premiership decider, and I said, look, it's already been decided. You know, Wigan are going to be there. Well, when I arrived at Wigan, I wasn't aware, again, of how many different competitions they had, and the Challenge Cup was certainly one that I really had no idea how important this game was. You know, I mentioned earlier the fact that, you know, they would say to me, well, we've got a midweek game and it could be a Lancashire Cup game or whatever, but this, you know, will be a Challenge Cup game. So, okay, no problem. And I guess it wasn't really until the end. We played in the semi-final and obviously won the game, and we were now playing in the final. It was in the dressing room after that game that I realised just how big this Challenge Cup was. You know, to me, it was as big as our grand final back home. Playing at Bolton Football Ground in the first round of the Challenge Cup was certainly a strange experience. Probably not so much the playing, but the fact that we went out onto the field, you could still see the markings of what we call soccer, the soccer field, and but a magnificent ground, and I guess that's what it's like for all the football grounds that you have here. You know, it was a wonderful feeling to be able to play there on such a great ground, and of course we come through with a victory, and so that well and truly got us on our way.
By Wigan, now Batley moving it hot on the attack onto Carroll. Carroll sends a long one, and it's been intercepted. Has he got the legs? Kenny going for the line, and he'll make this easily. Well, that was unfortunate for Batley, but Kenny spotted it well.
Playing against Warrington in the second round of the Challenge Cup, I guess, you know, it was one of those things. I just happened to have a good game. I don't know why. I can't sort of work out why you have good games and why you have bad games. But you know, I guess it wasn't just me. Obviously, the guys that I had around me also helped. Everything that I did seemed to work, but they put themselves in the position to accept the footballs. And yeah, it was a good game. And you know, of course, playing there, playing against Warrington, it was always nice to be able to beat them, being one of the local derby sides.
Potter. Ooh, it looked almost interception, but Kenny's done some good from it. David Stevenson. Oh, he's got Donlan with him. Graham West. Is he in? Oh, good backing up. Henderson Gill. Magnificent try. Oh, here's a good run. Oh, just look at this for the speed of the man. Is he going to go all the way? He is. Oh, magnificent try. Oh, credit to Wigan. They opened that ball out.
Well, when we played the next round, we played at Bradford, and I've got to say, I've never experienced anything like that before. It is an amazing ground where you start off at the top of this hill and walk all the way down the stairs, and I used to think, you know, the change rooms were at the top of the hill, and I thought, oh, I just hope we don't have to go back up there at half time, you know, and thankfully we didn't. Full credit to the side, you know, they stuck to their guns, and probably the other players more so than myself, because I'm still at this stage trying to work out how important this Challenge Cup is. But the other guys obviously knew and held on, and we were able to get through to the next round.
Wigan finding it difficult to make ground as Ford puts an overhead kick. Going for Gale. Takes it clean, he's gone for the line. Gale's over, and Gale scored. Wigan going to the lead.
Playing in the last round, or the semi-final as it was, you know, against Hull KR, but again it was at Ellen Road, and another soccer field, and great condition, and a lot wider than you're expecting, and so I guess in a way it was good for me. We could really certainly throw the ball around and have a good time, but I know I probably got a little bit carried away with throwing the ball around. And I remember I did throw a bad pass, and one of the Hull KR players managed to pick it up, and off he went up the field. And fortunately, we were able to pull him down short of the line.
Kenny. Oh, a good pass from goal. He's away, Gary Clark. Oh, he's got him just by the fingertips.
We held on with our defence and you know, got away with a victory. It was a tough game, and I was very thankful of my teammates that we were able to stop that try, and it was in the dressing room after that I suddenly realised and caught on as to how important this Challenge Cup was.
To Graham West, now then, he's got the open field, but he's got nobody. Oh, he's still going, and what a run! Oh, the try has taken everybody by surprise! One of the finest tries I think we'll ever see in a Challenge Cup semi-final.
You know, the way the players were jumping around and celebrating, you would have thought we'd won the Challenge Cup, but they then explained to me what it was all about, and you know, the fact that we go to Wembley, and even the fact that the club were actually supplying us with a suit. They bought us shoes. They did everything. It was something that I'd never experienced back home in Australia, and I was suddenly, as I said, suddenly realised that this was we're going to one of the biggest events in the game of rugby league. The build up to Wembley playing at Wembley Stadium in the Challenge Cup final wasn't so much dissimilar to the build up to our grand finals. Obviously, Wembley Stadium is a lot bigger and a better stadium than what we were playing at the Sydney Cricket Ground, but you know, I was sort of used to build-ups for big games like that, having played in a couple at home, or played in 3 of them in a row at home, and so it sort of didn't affect me too much, you know, and I could appreciate, yes, we were going to go down to London, you know, a few days before the game and acclimatise ourselves with the place, and I always remember we walked out onto Wembley Stadium a day or two before the game, and to me, I'd only ever seen Wembley Stadium on TV, watching FA Cup finals, and here I was now out in the middle of this ground, and it was just magnificent. There was no one around, but even then there was just this eerie feeling about this stadium, someone, I don't know where they got it from, but they found a football and they decided we might have a quick training session, and knowing full well we weren't really allowed on the ground, but started training. Next thing, there were security guards that come from everywhere to get us off the ground, but the mere fact we were able to be out there, and it was magnificent. It was a great memory for me, and something that I'll always cherish. John Ferguson was playing at Wigan earlier on in the year, and part of his contract, I think, was to go back and play for the Roosters back home, and then he was also available to play for Wigan in the Challenge Cup final if they made it, and of course it's history now where they did make it, and John Ferguson came back, so it was good to catch up with him when he came back, and all the players enjoyed his company, and he was a magnificent player. I still remember one of the tries he scored where he actually went down with an ankle injury, and he was down on his haunches, and in the meantime, while the play was continued on and Hull had dropped the ball, he was able to get up, pick it up, and he ran 30 or 40 metres and scored a try without a hand being laid on him, and I just stood there in disbelief how he could have done it, but he did, and that was the type of player he was. When you play in a final or grand final, you expect a few things to happen, but when I played in that final at Wembley Stadium in the Challenge Cup, and being in the dressing room, you came out, the opposition were opposite you. You walked along the tunnel, and I can appreciate the tunnel probably wasn't all that long, but it seemed like it was 3 or 4 miles long that day. Walking on very quiet, and you could see this light at the end, and suddenly when the players started to appear, obviously we had ball boys, we had the club managers, and then the coaches, and then the players started. I would have been back at number 6, and so I had a fair few people in front of me, and I could appreciate that I was able to get used to the noise.
Huge roar now as the two teams come out. Graham West leading the Wigan side, nearest to our camera. David Stevenson, Henderson Gill, and Brett Kenny from Australia. What an atmosphere it must be for these Australians.
Once I got out in the open, I just looked around, and obviously playing against Hull, who were black and white, and Wigan, who were red and white, or cherry and white as they were known, and that's all you could see around the stands was red, white and black, and they were singing and cheering, and it was just a magnificent spectacle to be able to be there and have a bit of a look around, and it's the first time I've ever done something like that. I guess it's the first time I've been in that situation, but I'm normally just walking out, concentrating on what I'm doing. But when you got out there, you couldn't help but look around at this magnificent stadium and see this magnificent crowd, and you could appreciate, how much this game meant to all the rugby league supporters. I got out there, and obviously we get to the halfway line and walk back down over to the sidelines, and we lined up, opposite the Hull, and when we get introduced to all the various dignitaries of the game, and all the players had their tracksuit tops on, and I sort of really don't have much of an idea what to do with my hands. I wasn't sure whether to have my hands crossed in front of me, behind me, or whatever, so I thought, well, the safest thing for me is to put my hands in my pockets of the tracksuit top, and that's what I did. I had my hands there, and then as the people came down, we got introduced. Maurice Lindsay, the chairman, would introduce the various people to me, and I was always introduced to, this is Brett Kenny, our Australian player. So obviously then they wanted to have a bit of a chat about, what's it like in Australia, and that's what I did. I'd put my hand out, I shook hands, put my hand back in my pocket, and had a bit of a conversation with them. The people themselves had no problems with that. I think it was more so the media. They hadn't had anyone like that before, and they probably took it as a bit of an offence. I was never meaning it to be disrespectful to anyone, but that was just the way I am.
Doesn't Brett Kenny look so casual? He looks confident. Well, he's probably used to the big occasion, this Australian test standoff, played all over the world. Well, I don't know whether Brett Kenny wants to play. He doesn't look interested, but I'm sure beneath that casual air there are some nerves.
With the dropping of Garry Schofield by Hull, it was a little bit of a surprise. He had played, in the previous games, and you would expect that he would have been there. Obviously, not being part of the whole club, I had no idea why or what the reason was, but in a lot of ways I know a lot of the Wigan guys were very thankful that it happened.
Yard from the line, Holden on the attack, Sterling again. Arcoy, back to Sterling. Well, he's doing everything, this little lad. Muggleton, Garry Campbell, he's got a 2-to-1 situation. Kevin James, and he's in. First try of the match, Kevin James took his opportunity well. 10 yards now from the whole line, 6 tackle. Forward, looking for Kenny, back to Potter, to Ferguson again. They're looking for this man, the danger, and he's in. What a majestic piece of rugby. He got the ball in a standing position. A brilliant sidestep. As they say in the north, he could sidestep on a threepenny bit, this lad. Well, this man's certainly come from Australia not for a holiday. He's determined to get into the game, John Ferguson. To West. To Kenny. Oh, good ball from Kenny. He's got space. Can he make it all the way? He's going round Garry Campbell, and he does. Superb try from Brett Kenny. Not good professional tactics here from Wigan, taking the ball in front of the post. Normally a side would take it away from the post to avoid any goal kicks. Oh, beautiful ball from Kenny, which puts Stevenson in space with Gill outside him. He's only got Campbell, the fullback, to beat. He's got the strength, he's got the speed, and he's beaten him. Oh, as good a try as we'll see. All made for Henderson Gale by that beautiful pass from Kenny. But I'm sure Brett Kenny there, that's the man he owes that try to, having a word with him. He ran onto the ball well, and I think Kenny's saying to him, look, I'll draw them in and push the ball out wide. You do the running, I'll do the thinking. Michael Ford to put the ball in for Wigan. And he does. He gets it. Oh, beautiful dummy from Kenny. He's got Sean Edwards linking up with him. Has he got the legs to the line? And he has. Oh, tremendously well worked try. Youngster Sean Edwards. The whole forward's just not backing up like the Wigan contingent. Peter Sterling, he's got a gap. He can make it himself if he goes. Oh, good try to Evans. Yes. I thought Peter Sterling was going himself. Steve Evans a little disgruntled about that tackle by Brian Dunn. 10 minutes gone. Wigan still 10 points in the lead. 22-12 in their favour. To Steve Norton. Sterling. Oh, and Ferguson's got the ball. He's got away. And it must be a try, this. He scampers home. No problem. And another 4 points to Wigan. John Muggleton just mistimed his run coming up. Muggleton to Devote. Is he in? Yes, he is. Quick play the ball. Substitute Garry Devote. But only one side have ever come back from a 10-point deficit. That was Leeds, but can Hull do it? Oh yes, and Luluai's going straight through. He's taken everybody by surprise. A tremendous try. Oh, the game now is alive. Beat one man. He's beaten two men, still going. Oh, and there's the hooter. What a game. Why, well, the Wigan players leap in the air. An incredible match. 28 points to 24 for Wigan.
I guess, playing at Wembley Stadium was probably bigger than playing in grand finals, but I always had a lot of success in grand finals and big games. And obviously Wembley Stadium Challenge Cup final was one of the biggest games I could play in, and so I was very fortunate. I enjoy that sort of atmosphere. I enjoy playing in those games, and I was fortunate enough to have a good game there for Wigan, and came away with the man of the match, which is the Lance Todd Trophy, and it was a great experience. I was informed afterwards in the dressing room that I was actually the first Australian to win a Lance Todd Trophy, so it was it made it a little more special, and I was very proud to have been able to achieve that. Well, I was fortunate enough to come up with a try in that final, and a lot of the people might have thought I'd showed plenty of speed and deception, but the reality was I was actually looking for Henderson Gill to pass the ball, and I looked to the side and I couldn't see him. I thought, well, I'm going to have to go on my own, and I've always been taught, you make a break, you've got the fullback to beat, you sort of do a little bit of an in and away, and I was able to do that, and got away from the fullback. I think Garry Campbell was a fullback for Hull, and went over and scored a try. So very memorable. I've actually got the game at home, and I watch it on the rare occasions. But even my wife, she had a look at it and saw it, and she said, you know, you don't run like that anymore, you know. But yeah, it was great. It was wonderful to be able to say that I've scored in a final of a Challenge Cup. Well, in that game, you know, we were in front and looking to be doing it quite comfortably, and then Hull came back and scored 2 quick tries. They scored 1 try, converted, and then we kicked off, and it was probably 2 or 3 tackles later they scored again. It was worrying times, I must admit, and after the game, some of the players said to me they've never heard me go off as much in a game. Well, before that I never did, you know, but it was, I guess, the emotion of the game and the fact that we were so close, you know, to winning this game. And I politely put it to them, I can't tell you exactly what I said, but they would politely put it to them that they were in this position last year and got beaten. You don't want to let this happen again, and so we went back. Obviously we, you know, were able to hold on and win the game. History shows you that we won the game, but we made it tough for ourselves for a while. To win it and was a magnificent feeling, and the celebrations were fantastic, you know, after the game. I know people would probably, if they go back and look at the game, they see me walking around, just sort of looking around at things, but I was looking for, obviously, my teammates from Parramatta, just to have a chat to them, and also looking for my family. Wigan had flown my mum and dad over, so I was looking for them, and then once I sort of found all them, well then I was ready to say, all right, well now I can celebrate with everybody else, you know. And having people come in onto the field from the crowd, I'd never experienced that, because we never did that at home. You weren't allowed on the field, and see people coming in, patting you on the back, giving you scarves, wrapping scarves around your neck, and the pleasing thing is it shows you just how much it meant to the Wigan fans, you know, and that was something that was very special, you know. As much as you like to win it and for yourself, and you can appreciate that we're actually out there playing the game. We've got a bit of control on what happens. They're sitting in the crowd, and they've got no control over what happens, you know. And so for them to be happy, it was a great feeling. And in the dressing rooms afterwards, well, you know, it's typical finals victory celebrations. There was champagne going everywhere, and I don't think anyone drank any of it, but there was plenty of it being thrown around.
He's only about 10 yards short from the stage line. Out to Holding. Into Kenny. Can he make it? Kenny. Yes! Great try by Kenny, just to the left of the stage stick.